Section 1. Surviving the Heat, Medieval Style. Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the sweltering heart of medieval Europe, where the sun hangs heavy in the sky and even the stones seem to sweat. Imagine no electricity, no fans, no air conditioning, just you, your wool tunic, and the endless blaze of a summer day. The heat doesn't care if you're a noble or a peasant. It seeps into your bones, dries the rivers, and tests the limits of your endurance. You can't escape it. You endure it. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun rises early and rises angry. You're already awake, maybe even before the first cock crows, because sleeping through a medieval summer morning is impossible unless you're lucky enough to live in a stone castle. And even then, it's no paradise. You wake in your small wooden cottage, packed tight with family. The air inside is thick. It smells of old straw, sweat, and smoke. Every breath feels like sipping from a warm cup of broth. So what do? You get outside, not to sunbathe, but to breathe. The cool dawn is your only mercy. You fetch water from the well before the sun turns the path into a griddle. You check the animals, milk the goat, maybe gather eggs if the hens haven't already fled to a shady corner of the yard. You move fast because you know what's coming. By midday, the village becomes a ghost town. The market square, usually bustling with gossip and trade, empties. No one's stupid enough to be out in the open unless they have to be. Those who do cover their heads with wide-brimmed straw hats, wool hoods soaked in water, or even bits of sackcloth. Shade becomes sacred, beneath trees, under eaves, inside barns. Some folks sit in the church all afternoon, pretending to pray, but mostly just basking in the cool stone shadows. A few even sleep there if the priest is merciful or distracted. You might wonder, didn't people just take off their clothes? Not quite. Modesty was stitched into your skin as deeply as sweat. But there were tricks. Women might wet their underdresses and let them cling to skin beneath thicker gowns. Men tied their shirts open at the chest or wore nothing but thin tunics. Children? They often went mostly naked in summer, darting through fields like sun-browned sprites. No one judged them. They were smart. Water becomes both a need and a luxury. You drink it constantly, but carefully. Wells can run dry. Rivers might shrink into muddy trickles. Some richer households add herbs to disguise the taste of stored rainwater. For others, beer is safer than water. Mild ale, brewed weak and consumed in place of water, keeps you hydrated and slightly buzzed, which honestly helps take the edge off the heat. But it's not just your body that suffers. The heat messes with your mind. Tempers shorten, patience thins. You've seen good men snap at a horse, curse at a wife, or fall silent for hours beneath the weight of the sun. You've known neighbors to brawl over buckets at the well. Even the bees get angrier. Historians still argue whether heat waves contributed to spikes in village crime, and some say yes, absolutely. The sun makes fools of us all. And then there's the work. Because heat or not, fields need tending. Wheat doesn't stop growing because you're hot. Hay must be cut, flipped, gathered. Harvest doesn't wait for a cold front. So you pace yourself. Work early, rest midday, return in the evening. Breaks become ritual, sitting beneath an oak tree, sharing a bit of bread dipped in oil, sipping from a shared jug. And always, someone watches the sky, praying for a breeze. Some days you dunk your feet in the stream just to feel something. Some days you rub crushed mint on your neck and wrists. Some days, when the air is truly cruel, you lie flat on the ground inside your home, hoping the packed dirt floor is just a little cooler than the air. It's not. But hope matters. Did they complain? Of course. Just not in ways we might expect. There's a word in Middle English, sweltering, used to describe oppressive heat. You might say, the day is sweltering like the devil's breath. Jokes helped. Complaints were laced with humor. Misery shared became misery managed. And always the old ones told stories of the summer of fire when the sun boiled the river and the cows gave blood instead of milk. Of the August when birds fell from the sky. Of the year when heat lasted so long that wolves came down from the mountains just to drink from village fountains. Were these stories true? Who knows? But they passed the hours. One lesser known trick? Clay pots, filled with water and wrapped in damp cloth, they acted like primitive coolers. Evaporative cooling, it works. You keep the pot near your bed, drink from it sparingly, and swear the water tastes sweeter than wine. A fringe remedy? Hanging wet sheets in windows. As the breeze passed through, it cooled the room, just a little. Historians debate whether these strategies were widespread or isolated to wealthier households, but archaeological digs have unearthed simple clay jars with porous designs, clear evidence people understood cooling by evaporation. Sometimes innovation grows from discomfort. As the sun sinks low, life returns. Villagers emerge like owls from their nests. Children play, neighbors talk, food is shared. You eat cold things when you can, cheese, bread, fruit. The cooking fire is kept low or not lit at all. The feast days are hardest when tradition demands roasting meat under open flame. You endure it with flushed cheeks and wine-stained lips. And finally, the night. It never cools enough. You sleep above the covers if you sleep at all. You toss and turn, listening to the sounds of the village, the creak of wood, the bark of a stray dog, the soft murmur of prayers said aloud. You pray too, not just for sleep but for weather, for clouds, for wind, for mercy, because tomorrow the sun will rise again, and you will rise with it, not because you want to, but because you must. Section 2. A village's routine under scorching skies. You wake again, as always, with the dawn. Except now, even the morning breeze carries warmth, like someone opened the oven too early. The chickens are already restless, feathers fluffed and beaks half open to pant like dogs. You splash water on your face, but the well is shallower than yesterday. You measure with your eyes. It's falling faster than it should. Still, the day must begin. The heat dictates your routine, slicing it into fragments. Early morning is when you move fast, sweeping, baking, fetching herbs. Because by mid-morning, your skin will be damp under your clothes and your fingers too swollen to tie knots. You wrap your head with a linen cloth soaked in cool water, and then again with a second dry cloth over top, primitive insulation. You heard the idea from an old traveler once, and it saved you more than once from fainting in the fields. Other villagers have their own methods. One woman rubs sour milk on her arms, claiming it draws out the heat. Another mixes vinegar and water to wipe down the inside walls of her home. It cools the spirit, she says. Maybe it's true, maybe it's nonsense. But in this kind of heat, belief is its own kind of survival. By now the church bell has rung, not for prayer, but for warning. The priest calls it a day of extreme humors, a heat so strong it's thought to imbalance the body's natural fluids. According to medieval medicine, the human body is governed by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. When the weather turned violent, too hot, too wet, too dry, the humors went haywire. You might sweat uncontrollably or feel dizzy or speak gibberish. The recommended remedy? Bleeding in some cases, or the application of cooled herbs, chamomile, mint, sage, sometimes basil. You once saw a noble steward dunk his master's feet in rose water and rub his temples with vinegar. It looked pleasant, honestly. You don't have rose water. You have creek water and a handful of withered rosemary. Still, you make do. You see it in the fields, people dragging their hoes like anchors, their tunics soaked dark at the spine and armpits. You can smell the heat on them, metallic like stone and old sweat and sunburn. The old man who tends the sheep sits with a bowl of water at his side, pressing soaked cloths to the sheep's heads, murmuring softly, "Don't boil, little ones, don't boil." In the town square, the tanner has covered his vats and left. The leather stinks too much when the sun's high, and flies make it a second hell. The baker's oven is quiet. Bread was made hours before sunrise and will not be touched again until tomorrow. Even the noble manor high on the hill shows signs of surrender. Tapestries hang motionless from the windows, and pale faces peek out briefly, only to retreat into darkened halls. Rich or poor, no one escapes the sun. Well, almost no one. The wise ones, usually women over 50, know the tricks. They eat less, drink more, and spend the hottest hours lying flat in the darkest room of their cottage, shutters closed, mouths shut. They live slower. It's not laziness, it's wisdom. They've seen what happens when people pretend they're stronger than the weather. You remember that story of the miller's boy who tried to carry 2 sacks of grain under the noonday sun. He collapsed near the mill pond, face down. His skin peeled like bark. The priests called it punishment for pride, but everyone else called it heat stroke. They just didn't have the word for it. The phrase back then, the fire took him, and the fire still takes some, now and then. There's talk, whispered in shaded corners, of the coming of another dry season. An old man at the edge of the village claims he saw frogs digging into the earth, an omen of drought. The midwife says the bees are flying lower than usual. Even the birds are quiet. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly understood the signs of climate patterns, but the oral traditions? They tell a story of intuition honed by survival. Afternoon passes like honey, slow, sticky, suffocating. You spend it weaving under the eaves, fingers slipping on the thread. The rhythm helps. Up, pull, twist, down. You forget the sweat on your back. You forget the sound of the heat itself. Because yes, heat has a sound, a soft shimmer like metal hissing. Or maybe that's just your imagination. The mind plays tricks in weather like this. At sunset, the village breathes again. You hear shutters creak open, doors unlatched, children emerge like sprigs after rain, barefoot and shouting. A group of boys runs to the stream with sloshing buckets, and the girls braid each other's damp hair on the steps. Even laughter returns. Dinner is light, a bit of barley porridge with onion, perhaps a cucumber from the garden, cut thin. You chew slowly. Talking feels like effort. You drink the last of the sour beer and bless the yeast. You lie on the floor to sleep. The bed is too warm. A cat curls nearby, panting. The night is loud with crickets and the occasional owl call. But the air moves now. Barely, but enough. You think about tomorrow. The sun will come back, merciless and whole. But so will you, not fresh, not comfortable, but ready. Because when the heat tries to break you, you bend, you adapt, you outlast. You always do. Section 3. Coolness was a privilege and a lifesaver. Even before your eyes open, you feel it. That familiar blanket of thick, unmoving air pressing on your chest like a sack of wool. The coolness of night has already fled. You groan softly, muscles sore from restless sleep. The dirt floor beneath you still holds a faint chill, but not enough. You roll onto your back and look at the ceiling beams, half expecting them to drip with heat like melting candles. This is the kind of day that tests your resolve. In the villages, surviving the heat was never just about staying cool. It was about staying clever. And for those with a little coin to their name or just the right connections, cleverness became privilege. Some of the wealthier households in larger towns and cities built what were called cooling rooms. These were small, stone-lined cellars dug into the earth beneath the house, often used to store perishables. But in summer, people descended into them to escape the worst hours of the day. You could sit there, back against damp stone, eating dried figs or sipping watered-down wine, and pretend, just for a moment, that you lived somewhere colder. The nobility, of course, had it best. A noblewoman might spend the hottest part of her day reclining on cushions inside thick stone walls, shaded by heavy tapestries soaked in scented water, lavender, rose, sometimes lemon balm. Servants fanned her with goose feather fans. If she were truly lucky, her estate might be near a river, and she could float in a skiff beneath a parasol, trailing her fingers in the water. But for you, you're not noble. You're not even comfortably poor. So you make do. You take your chores underground if you can. You spend an hour sharpening tools in the shade of the barn. You carry your laundry not to the stream today, but to the well's edge where the water is colder. You work slower, stretch longer, and breathe deeper. You learn not to fight the heat, but to flow with it. In your cottage, you try something new. You hang a wet sheet over the doorway and sit behind it, letting the breeze filter through the damp fabric. It's not cold, but it's less hot, which is good enough. You place a clay pot of water near your bed, wrapped in a damp cloth, your own little medieval air conditioner. Evaporative cooling. You smile. It works. That's the thing about the medieval mind. It was practical. Survival didn't come from grand ideas, but from tiny ones. Details. Tricks, like storing water in tall jugs with narrow necks to slow warming, or hanging herbs near windows to discourage flies, or painting walls with lime to reflect heat. Yes, that too. Many historians point out that Mediterranean towns often used white lime plaster for this very reason. Some even say the color of medieval homes wasn't just aesthetic, it was strategic. But coolness wasn't just about temperature. It was about health. Too much heat wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. You've seen it before. A child collapsed after running too long in the sun. A woman shaking with fever after harvesting flax without water. A man muttering nonsense, his eyes wild after trying to outrun a fire in the fields. The causes? People blamed bad air, imbalanced humors, curses. You blame the sun. So you protect yourself how you can. You eat light, barley, lentils, soft cheese. Heavy meat sits in the stomach and cooks there. You drink often, though never too fast, and add herbs when possible. Mint to cool the body. Chamomile to ease the nerves. Elderflower to promote sweating, which was considered healthy, an idea not entirely wrong, by the way. One old remedy you've heard, keep a copper coin under your tongue. Some say it draws out the body's excess heat. Others say it just keeps your mouth too busy to dry out. Either way, it's a trip. You try it once. It tastes like rust. By late afternoon, the heat is thick enough to press your thoughts flat. You sit in the shade with your back against the wall and watch the world shimmer. The thatched roof seems to ripple, the fields flicker at the edges. A dog lies panting in a puddle that's almost gone. Somewhere, a raven squawks. And then, for a moment, you swear you see it. A ripple in the air, like a spirit passing by. You blink. It's just heat waves. You know that now. But in earlier times, people saw those ripples and thought they were ghosts. The veil is thinner when the sun burns, someone once said. Maybe they were right. Maybe the heat makes you see things, or maybe it just brings you closer to yourself. As dusk approaches, a kind of peace sets in. The world hasn't burned. You've made it through another day. And with any luck, the night will bring a breeze, or even better, rain. You pray for it, not aloud, but in your bones. You dream of thunderclouds. Tomorrow might be worse, or it might be better, but either way, you'll rise again. Wrap your head, soak the cloth, sip the beer, smile when someone shares a shade, and keep surviving, because coolness might be a privilege, but endurance, that's your birthright. Section 4. The shadows become sanctuary. You wait for it, the moment the sun begins to tilt westward, and the long, blessed shadows stretch across the village like reaching fingers. It's subtle at first. A cooler brush of wind through the barley, the glint of light losing its sharpness. A sigh, collective and silent, spreads through the town. You're not alone in feeling it. Everyone knows the shift. The day hasn't ended, but the heat has loosened its grip. A little. This is when the village comes alive again. Children who spent hours lying on stone floors now tumble into the open. Doors creak as shutters are unlatched. Chickens peck their way back toward coops, feathers sagging, their combs wilted from sun. You rise from your shady perch and stretch, not a luxury, but a necessity. Your back cracks, your fingers still hold the imprint of the spindle you clutched earlier, but you're breathing easier. Shadows are not just the absence of sunlight. In medieval Europe, they were literal lifesavers. Stone walls, thick and uneven, became fortresses of coolness. The narrow alleyways between cottages were treasured escape routes during the hottest hours. You recall how your grandmother used to say, even God hides in the shade on days like this. Maybe she was right. You remember how monasteries were built with cloisters, long, moss-covered corridors where monks could walk and pray shielded from heat or rain. The design wasn't just architectural, it was intentional, practical, and if you're being honest, a little holy. You'd give anything for a cloister of your own. As the sun slinks lower, you begin the second half of your work, fetching, repairing, feeding. But slowly, you still sweat, but it's the manageable kind, the kind your body understands. Your head doesn't pulse anymore. Your tongue isn't paper. You fill the troughs with water for the animals and run your hands through it slowly, letting the droplets cling to your arms. The evening meals begin. From nearby windows, you catch the scent of onions roasting in goose fat, cabbage stewing with vinegar, and sometimes, if you're lucky, spiced apple. People eat more now. With the fear of heat stroke fading, appetites awaken. You stew lentils with leeks and break a crust of yesterday's bread. You think of nobles dining on cold meat pies and sweet wine. You settle for your humble fare, but take a moment to savor it anyway. It's in the shadows that life returns to something close to normal. Women gather in shared courtyards, knees brushing as they shell peas or mend torn tunics. Conversation, slow and quiet in the heat, grows brighter. Someone tells a story of her cousin's pig, who escaped during last summer's drought and was found swimming in the brewer's vat. Another woman laughs too loudly. You can't help but join. And yet, there's still tension in the air. The heat has broken for now, but not forever. Everyone knows that tomorrow it might come back harder, meaner. Shadows are sanctuary, yes, but they're also reminders. You can only hide for so long. You remember an old belief, perhaps told to you in childhood, that shadows hold memory, that every person casts a shadow not only of their body but of their spirit. In the heat of summer, when the ground is cracked and your patience is thinner than your blouse, you wonder if your shadow remembers better times, cooler ones. Maybe it's foolish, but you watch it stretch beside you and feel comfort. There's science behind the sensation too, though no one here would call it that. Buildings made of stone, packed with straw, or coated in mud plaster absorb less heat. Those who worked with natural materials knew this intuitively. They built with what could breathe, and breathe it does. The difference inside such homes versus the open air is staggering. You've stood in a friend's thatched cottage and felt like you were inside a clay womb, cool, earthy, still. Historians still debate whether medieval architects intended these temperature-controlling effects or simply stumbled into them. But you don't care. All you know is that some homes feel kinder than others when the sun's too cruel. By twilight, the world begins to exhale. You gather with others in the square. No formal event, just people. A few jugglers, 2 old men with flutes, and a boy who drums on an upturned pot. The music isn't good, but it's enough. Someone pours watered ale. A girl hands you a cup. You sip. The ale is warm, but bitter and grounding. You feel the throb behind your temples fade. You feel your ribs expand with deeper breath. For the first time in days, you forget the sun. And then, miracle of miracles, there's a breeze. It ripples through the crowd like a whispered prayer. Heads tilt toward it. Eyes close. Dresses billow slightly. Someone claps, and no one mocks them. Because in this moment, you are all grateful for the same thing, relief. Your thoughts drift to the stories of fire spirits, elementals who punish the vain and reward the humble with cool rain. A childish belief, maybe, but tonight you whisper a thank you just the same. Back at home, you prepare for sleep. Not in your bed, not yet. You'll lie near the door, where the air moves. A bowl of water rests beside you. You wet your pulse points, wrists, neck, the back of your knees. An old midwife taught you that. She also said placing a pebble under your tongue would keep your dreams cool. You try it. The stars are out now, flickering and indifferent, but you feel watched. Not in fear, but in comfort. As though the heat itself, once fierce and punishing, now stands at the edge of the village, now waiting to be asked back in. Tomorrow, not tonight. Tonight, you rest. And when your body finally surrenders to sleep, it does so not in defeat, but in triumph. You outlasted the fire again. Section 5, Dreams of Rain and the Power of Waiting. You dream of thunder. It rolls low and slow across your thoughts like a wagon wheel through wet earth. You dream of raindrops thick as beans, pounding the rooftop, flooding the gutters, washing the dust from your skin. You can feel it, cool and insistent, on the backs of your hands, on your eyelids, soaking the hem of your dress and the tips of your hair. The dream is so vivid that when you wake, your mouth is already open, waiting to drink. But there's nothing, only stillness, only heat. The fire may have receded for the night, but it hasn't left. It waits, crouched just beyond the horizon. You sit up slowly and listen. A few roosters cry too early, a dog pants nearby. But the sky, oh, the sky is dry, clear, relentless. You step outside and look up. No clouds, not even a smear. And so another day begins with waiting. In the Middle Ages, waiting was not passive. It was an art, a survival skill. You waited for crops to grow, for letters to arrive, for lords to return, for children to recover from fevers. And in heat like this, you waited for storms. But waiting too has a cost. Each day without rain stretches the nerves thinner. Crops begin to wilt. Cows drink more and give less milk. Chickens peck each other out of irritability. Babies cry. Tempers rise. And you, well, you begin to feel as though your own skin is shrinking. You aren't alone. Across the village, others feel it too. A woman throws her wash water too hard, splashing a neighbor's door. A man mutters darkly about bad omens, about how last month's eclipse must have cursed the season. An old widow blames the carpenter's apprentice for not praying hard enough. Superstition becomes community sport. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were more fatalistic or hopeful in times of crisis. Some say they surrendered to God's will, others say they leaned into rituals of control, charm bags, whispered blessings, secret offerings at crossroads. Maybe both are true. You've seen people swing between faith and fury like it's the only way to stay upright. You walk to the market, slowly. There are fewer stalls today. No fish, the stream's too low. No fresh greens. The baker offers only yesterday's bread. He shrugs. Too hot for the ovens, he says, wiping his brow with a floury arm. You trade a bit of cloth for a wedge of cheese, so dry it cracks. You ask someone, do you think it will rain soon? The answer is always the same, God willing. But God seems stubborn lately, so you wait and you prepare. You reinforce the shutters with damp cloth to catch any breeze. You fill extra pots with water from the well, not out of panic, just preparation. You gather herbs, mint again, horehound, yarrow, some to cool the body, some just for comfort. And in your mind, you begin composing a prayer, not the kind taught by priests, but your own. Something like, bless this sweat, bless this breath, bless my neighbor's sharp tongue. Let the clouds hear me. Let the wind remember us. You say it under your breath. You don't even believe in it, but it helps. Back in the village square, someone has brought out a bell. Not the church bell, this one's smaller, hung from a pole. They ring it 3 times and begin a processional walk, slow and barefoot, through the fields. It's called a rogation, a plea for rain, a tradition old as memory, repainted with Christian colors but older than saints. People carry crosses. Some carry sheaves of wheat. A child clutches a bowl of water and lets it spill gently onto the ground. Symbolic, desperate, both. You join them. The sun pounds on your back as you walk. Dust coats your toes. But in this shared act of hope, there is something steadying. You don't believe the rain will come just because you ask, but you believe in asking. You believe in not giving up. That evening, after the bells fall silent and the procession ends, you return to your cottage. Your skin stings from the sun. Your legs tremble with fatigue. You eat slowly. You sip your beer. You light your candle. And then, you hear it, not a crack of thunder, not yet, but a hush, a shift. You run outside. The wind, soft and real, licks at your sleeves. The leaves in the trees tremble. And above you, a single beautiful cloud floats in from the west. You don't dare hope too hard, but you close your eyes and hold your breath, because sometimes, in the heat of the longest, cruelest summer, even a whisper of change can be enough to carry you through another day. Section 6. When rain finally comes. You wake not to the usual stillness, but to a sound so foreign, so divine, that for a moment you think you're dreaming again. Rain. Real, undeniable rain. Not a drizzle, not a mist, but full-bodied, window-drumming, roof-pounding rain. You sit bolt upright, disoriented, and fling open the shutters. It's still dark, but the sky is lit with that strange silver glow only a storm can give. Everything is soaked, the courtyard, the fence posts, the chickens half shielded under the eaves. The earth drinks greedily, gurgling in the gutters, swelling with life. You step outside barefoot and raise your face to the heavens. It is cold and glorious. Your shift clings to your skin in seconds. You don't care. You laugh aloud, not a ladylike chuckle, but a hoarse, guttural joy from somewhere near your ribs. Across the alley, a neighbor does the same. Another woman leans from her window and simply whispers, "Thank God!" Even the animals respond. The cows moo louder. The geese flail about in the puddles. The village dog gallops down the main path like it's a festival. You wonder if they felt the pressure too, in their own way. The tension, the waiting, the unbearable stillness. You spend the morning soaked to the bone and smiling. There's no work, not yet. Rain halts everything. Laundry hangs limp, tools rust if left out, soil becomes sludge. So instead you watch. It is rare to be allowed stillness without guilt. But no one moves fast when rain is a blessing. People gather under awnings, hands clasped, breath visible in the cooling air. You share stewed apples from the cellar with a child who offers you a snail she rescued from the mud. You accept it solemnly. She beams. In medieval villages, rain was more than weather. It was omen. It was message. It was survival. Historians note that peasants tracked weather not by seasons, but by memory. The last time the clouds broke like this, old Marek died, someone might say. Or it rained like this the year we lost the West Field. Weather was not a backdrop. It was the story. Every downpour had echoes of something lost or saved. You remember what the priest once told you: rain washes the world clean, but only after it drowns what's weak. At the time it sounded harsh, but now, ankle deep in soft mud and tears, you understand. This is not just about relief, it's about endurance. You endured. And yet, the rain does more than just soften the ground. It stirs something else inside you, a lightness, a dare. You start to feel it around midday, when the thunder has faded to a distant grumble and the rain eases to a steady whisper. You spin in a circle like a girl, skirt fanned out, arms wide. The air is cool and wild. The village smells like mint, wet wool, smoke, and earth. A fringe detail not many know: in some parts of medieval Europe, women believed rainwater collected during the first storm of summer held healing power. They'd save it in jugs, use it to wash their faces, bless their children, mix it with honey for a sore throat. You scoop a palmful into your mouth and let it trickle down your chin. It tastes like iron, like something ancient. That night, the fire burns differently. No longer desperate, no longer defensive. You light it for warmth, yes, but also for comfort, for gathering. Neighbors come. Wet boots are stacked by the hearth. The midwife brings dried lavender, crumbles it into the flames, and suddenly the room smells like calm. You sit with others and share the story of the rain's return. Everyone remembers it a little differently. One woman swears she heard the trees sigh before the first drop fell. A man insists the lightning drew a cross in the sky. The blacksmith's boy claims he danced in the nude and summoned it himself. You all laugh, because why not? In the Middle Ages, stories were how people made sense of their lives. And this is a moment worth remembering. Someone brings out a lute. The strings are slightly damp, but the tune carries. A low hum fills the cottage. It's not a song of celebration, not exactly. It's slower, gentle. The kind of music that says, "You made it, you're still here." The kind of music that needs no words. There's one older woman who hasn't spoken all night. She finally lifts her cup and says, "It won't last, it never does. But we had this, and that's enough." Later in bed, you listen to the rain soften into sleep. It drums gently now, not with urgency, not with hunger, but with rhythm, like a lullaby. You curl beneath your blanket and feel your heartbeat slow. Your fingers relax, your jaw unclenches. You hadn't even noticed it was clenched before. You whisper to the rafters, not quite a prayer, not quite a thought. Let tomorrow be cool. Let the air stay kind. And maybe, just maybe it will. Section 7. Mud, mold, and morning after. The rain doesn't stop. That first day it was salvation. The second, it was grace. But by the third, it begins to feel heavy. The soil, so grateful before, now groans under the weight. Puddles become small ponds. The pathways through the village turn to thick, sucking mire. You lose a shoe walking to the chickens and curse, soft but sharp, as your foot plunges ankle deep in cold, grainy muck. It clings to you. Mud under your nails, mud on your hem, mud in your breath, it seems, as everything becomes damp, then wetter, then soaked. Roofs leak, walls sweat, the hearth struggles to catch a flame. You hang your linen indoors, but nothing dries. The cottage begins to smell of mildew and wool and frustration. Still, the sky stays gray, endless, immovable. And the waiting returns, but of a different kind. You wait for it to end now, not begin. Where once your prayers begged for rain, now they plead for just an hour of dry wind, a patch of blue, anything to split the sky. But the weather has its own ideas. Historians have long debated the impact of extended rains on medieval life. It wasn't just discomfort, it could mean disease. Wet conditions bred rot in stored grains. Long-term damp led to fever fogs, a term from village folk who swore their minds dulled in long wet spells. Some even claimed the devil preferred rain. It drowned spirits, they said, and kept the angels from seeing sin. You wonder if that's true. Because on the fourth day, something shifts. People get quieter. The laughter fades. Tempers get sharp again. Someone mutters that the priest's prayers must be off. A child is slapped for tracking muddy prints inside. The baker, whose oven has gone cold for 3 days, throws a jug and breaks it just to hear the sound. And you start dreaming again. But this time, the dreams are of sun. Not gentle sun, but scorching, blinding, open-field sun. In your dreams, it burns your skin, cracks the dirt, splits the stones. You wake sweating and confused. Because once you longed for this rain, and now you can barely stand it. It's human, isn't it? The wanting. the never being quite satisfied. Still, there are small mercies. You find them in places you didn't expect. The laughter of a neighbor's baby, splashing joyfully in a barrel filled to the brim with rainwater. The way the ivy on your cottage wall has suddenly burst into a wild, curling green. The mushrooms you find at the edge of the fence, fat, silver, almost glowing. You dry them carefully, hopeful they'll keep. And there's work to do, always. You scrub walls now to keep the mold from crawling. You drain barrels when they overflow. You tip the roof tiles to shift the pooling water. You chop kindling with blistered hands, searching for wood that hasn't turned soft and useless. But what else is there? You can't flee. You don't have the means. Nor would you abandon your neighbors, your animals, your post. So you endure. And then something strange happens. You begin to hear stories. At first, quiet, then louder. A cow birthed twins in the next village, both stillborn. A strange man appeared at the northern road, offering silver coins for secrets. A woman in the forest claims she saw a black stag watching her sleep. You raise your eyebrows at that one. But still, the stories keep coming. Rain stirs superstition. When the world feels off balance, people reach for symbols, omens, warnings. A dead bird on a doorstep, a cold hearth refusing to light, a child who sings a song no one taught them. Every strange thing becomes a sign. You remember your grandmother's sayings. Rain 3 days running means a soul is weeping. If the mold climbs higher than the window, move house. Watch the cats. If they won't cross the floor, neither should you. Silly things. But you start to watch, just in case. And on the 6th day, something changes. Not the weather, but you. You wake feeling calmer. Not resigned, just patient. You make a stew with dried beans and onion skins. You add mint, not because it will taste good, but because it reminds you of the meadow in June. You wrap your legs in dry linen before bed. You laugh, unexpectedly, when the cat leaps into a puddle and immediately regrets it. You've adapted. And in the Middle Ages, adaptation wasn't a choice, it was life itself. Survival wasn't about winning, it was about staying long enough to try again. You understand now why the elders seem so serene. It's not peace, it's rhythm. The rain becomes background noise. Not because it has stopped, but because you found your rhythm inside it. You lie in bed that night and listen. It still falls. But instead of praying for it to end, you say only this: let me greet tomorrow. Let it be enough. And somehow, it is. Section 8. When the river rises. It starts with a sound. Not thunder, not more rain, but something else. A low, deep groan like a tired animal waking. You hear it before dawn, lying half asleep in your cot, heart already tuning to the pitch of danger. Then it comes again, louder this time. A rolling, rhythmic crash like something ancient and hungry dragging itself across the land. You throw on your cloak, shove your feet into wet shoes, and run. Outside, the village is gathering. You don't need anyone to tell you what's happening. You already know. Everyone does. The river has risen. Finally, it has had enough of being tamed by the banks, enough of the logs and stones and rushes. It has swallowed its path whole and come for yours instead. The bridge is gone, or rather, it's there, but tilted, splintered, halfway eaten by the churning brown water. You see a sheep carcass float past, a chicken coop, a basket of someone's laundry, spinning like a sad carousel. Flood, a word that has teeth. You remember old stories. The time the river took 2 goats and a boy with a wooden leg. The time it flooded so high, water reached the church steps, and they blamed a midwife for bringing sin. You were small then. You remember fear, but not like this. Now it's real. Villagers shout, some cry. The blacksmith is already hammering together a barricade with fence posts. The priest stands nearby, holding a cross too small to help. A mother calls her children to higher ground. Another hauls sacks of grain to a loft. You help. Of course you help. There's no other choice. In the Middle Ages, floods weren't rare, but they were ruinous. You didn't have insurance, or sandbags, or weather forecasts. When the water came, it was a test of strength, of neighborliness, of faith. Some didn't pass. Historians still argue whether these communities suffered more from weather or from how they responded to it. But the truth is, no response was perfect. Everyone just did what they could. You grab whatever is dry and haul it to the upper floor. The loft smells like hay, dust, mouse droppings. It becomes home for now. Your neighbors crowd into the barn. Chickens roost on windowsills. The pigs have taken over the courtyard. snorting as if none of this concerns them. You hear someone laugh, high, shaky, too close to weeping. You laugh too, because what else is there? By afternoon, the village looks like a floating island. Paths are gone, replaced by cold brown canals. You've tied your skirts at your knees. The water slaps your thighs when you wade to check on the widow next door. She's fine. She even makes tea. You sit together, steaming mugs in hand, water lapping at your ankles. You toast to new roots. In the Middle Ages, you learn to joke even in crisis. Not because it's funny, but because it's necessary. That night, the wind picks up again. The rain returns, gentler now but steady. You sleep in a loft with 10 others, children snoring, old men muttering in their dreams. One girl reaches for your hand. You hold it without speaking. And through the slats in the roof, you watch the stars blink back into view. It's the first time you've seen them in over a week. You whisper their names. Orion, Pleiades, the swan. You don't know if they're right, but it doesn't matter. Naming them gives them power, like naming hope. A fringe belief lingers in your mind. Villagers once thought the stars controlled rainfall, that when too many stars blinked at once, it meant the heavens were leaking. You wonder if the stars weep for you, or with you. You close your eyes and dream of boats, not rescue boats, not grand ships, just simple ones, small enough to carry your family, your goats, your dreams. Morning comes. The river has crested, the worst is over, but it has left scars. A hut swept away, a dog gone missing, mushy fields where cabbages once grew. Your bones ache from sleeping curled on wood, but you're upright, you're moving. People emerge, damp but alive. You light fires again, you dry your clothes, you rebuild what was knocked loose. The carpenter patches walls, children dig ditches, the priest blesses a bridge made of barrels and planks. You try not to think about how long it will hold, and through it all the river gurgles on, unbothered, unashamed, returning to its banks like nothing happened. You wonder if it remembers. You do. Not in bitterness, not in fear, but in something closer to reverence. The river taught you something about limits, about letting go, about how small you are and how strong. You whisper thanks to it, and to the sky, and to the soft, ragged breath still in your chest. You survived the flood, not because you fought it, but because you flowed with it. Section 9. The Aftermath Rituals. When the sun finally returns, it does not sneak in shyly. It blazes, pierces through the clouds like a sword. You wake with it on your face, sharp and golden, cutting through the lingering damp. It should feel like salvation, but it doesn't. Not yet. The ground is still soft, spongy beneath your feet. The air, thick and buzzing with the scent of mold, ash, and something sour, like old milk left too long on a windowsill. Your hands itch to work, but it's unclear where to begin. Everything looks the same, and yet everything has shifted. The village begins the slow unfurling. They call it the unwinding. It isn't written in any book, nor preached at any pulpit, but it exists. Passed from grandmother to granddaughter, whispered in kitchens and sung under breath while wringing out skirts. It's the ritual of return, the sequence of acts, sacred through repetition, that restores balance after nature's fury. You start with fire, a fresh one, built with dry wood from the eaves if you can find any. Smoke curls upward like a sigh. Everyone around you is doing the same. Fire becomes signal, not just heat, but hope. Proof that the world can still be coaxed into cooperation. Next comes sweeping. It feels odd, sweeping dirt out of a house surrounded by mud. But it's symbolic. You sweep the corners of the cottage, whispering, "Out with it, all of it." Dust, doubt, decay. You lift the rugs, hang them over branches, beat them clean with sticks. Then come the thresholds. In the Middle Ages, people believed evil entered through doorways, so you salt them. A fine dusting across the front step, a few lavender sprigs in the corners. Your neighbor uses rosemary and murmurs something in Breton. You don't ask what, you simply nod. The rituals are personal. Historians often overlook these gestures. They call them superstition, domestic folklore, women's work, but they miss the power in it. In a world without therapy or crisis counselors, these acts were the recovery. You return to the stream. The water is higher now but clearer, the current brisk. You kneel, wash your hands slowly, not because they're dirty, though they are, but because it feels like an offering. The sun hits your knuckles, you let it linger. And when you rise, it's not just your hands that are clean. Other villagers follow suit. The miller's wife carries out damp flour sacks, lays them flat to dry. Children scrub their toys with moss. The priest finally leaves the chapel and walks barefoot into the village green, eyes skyward, lips moving. And that's when the stories begin again. Not of doom this time, of endurance. The child who sang to keep the chickens calm during the storm. The old man who offered up his blankets to strangers. The girl who cooked soup for 12 when she had food for 4. You listen, you remember. Then comes the bell. Every village has one. Yours is cracked, rust-stained, crooked on its rope, but it rings. A long, low note that calls everyone to the center. Not for sermon, not for warning, for reckoning. They call it the blessing of the mud. It happens after every long storm. Villagers gather, each bringing something salvage, buttons, scraps, twine, seeds, bones. They pile them in a woven basket. Then together they plant a tree in the softest earth. The priest says it's for penance. The herbalist claims it's for healing. The baker says it's just nice to have a new tree. You don't care. You place a stone from your hearth beneath its roots. You feel better. The Middle Ages were not kind, but they were not joyless. Even in ruin, people found rhythm. You hang laundry again, not in desperation, but habit. You mend a roof. You replant the garden, carrots maybe, leeks, something hardy. You sleep better that night. The dreams come again, but they're different now. No drowning, no frantic splashing. Just you in a boat made of bread, floating under stars, peaceful, a little absurd. You laugh when you wake, and maybe that's the final ritual. Laughter, not to mock the storm, but to mark that you are still here. You walk barefoot to the new planted tree, press a hand to its damp bark. A bee dances above a blossom nearby. You hum a tune your grandmother used to sing, one without words, just sound, rising and falling like waves. The flood is over. The work begins anew, but you are not who you were before. You are more. Section 10. What you save, what you leave. The days stretch on, warm and bright and deceptively gentle, like nothing ever happened. But you know better now. The land remembers, the walls remember, and most of all, you remember. You carry the weight in your muscles, in the way your hands grip a broom just a little tighter, in the way your eyes scan the sky more often than they used to. You begin the slow task of inventory. Not just of grain, not just of tools, but of loss. What's gone, what's broken, what's beyond saving. You find your old wooden comb wedged under the bed, snapped in half. A pair of boots, soaked and ruined. Your mother's recipe book, the ink blurred into watercolor ghosts. And still, you're lucky. Because your home still stands. Because the roof, though leaky, still holds the stars out. Because some people weren't so fortunate. In the village square, a new kind of gathering takes place. Not for prayer, not for planting, but for choosing what stays and what must go. This is where the hardest decisions live. Not in the chaos of the storm, but in the stillness after, when the heart has time to ache. You bring out things you thought you'd never part with. A spindle your aunt gave you, a shawl that smells of rosewater, a cracked bowl. You lay them gently on a shared cloth. Beside them, your neighbors place their treasures too. No one speaks, but everyone feels. The auction isn't about money, it's about memory, utility, letting go. You take home a pan in better shape than yours, a roll of wool, a brass cup with a dent you like the look of. You leave behind your bowl. The boy from the edge of the village picks it up with reverence. That, too, is a kind of healing. Historians still argue about what defined medieval resilience. Some say it was the church. Others say it was sheer necessity, a refusal to die. But you know, it was this. The quiet courage of beginning again with open palms. A week passes, then another. The ground firms up. Flowers bloom with reckless confidence. Bees return to their hives. You walk the length of the village one afternoon and marvel at how quickly it all reassembles itself. As if the flood were a fever dream, a bad night that's finally broken. But you haven't forgotten. You keep a bundle of dried herbs above the door, just in case. You patch the wall before the next crack appears. You whisper a thank you to the well every morning, even when the water runs clear. And there's a new ritual now. Every evening, just as the sun kisses the horizon, the children gather and float petals down the stream. It started as a game, but it's become something more, a soft, communal exhale. You join them once, just once. You let a single petal go and watch it spin away, carried by a river you no longer fear but respect. One night you dream of fireflies. Not the insects themselves, but the idea of them. Flickers of light in darkness, tiny blinks of yes in a world so full of no. You wake up smiling, your heart lighter than it's been in weeks. You begin to hum again. Not out loud, not just yet, but in your head as you wash, as you sweep, as you mend. Tunes with no words, just breath and rhythm. A reminder that life isn't just work and waiting. It's also music. There's a boy who begins whittling toys again. A girl who paints with mud on old scraps of linen. The old man by the chapel writes poems in charcoal on the walls. He says they're temporary, like everything. That's what makes them sacred. You start to notice beauty again. The way sunlight filters through a patched window. The feel of warm bread in your palm. The smell of mint crushed underfoot. These are not grand joys, but they are honest. And honest joys are what get you through the next flood. Because yes, it will come. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. That is the nature of the world. To rise, to test you, to make you prove that you still want to be here. And you do. More than ever. So you collect seeds. You tuck them into pockets, into cracks in the wall, into jars hidden behind flour sacks. Not just for food, for future. For the next planting, the next season, the next you. Because survival isn't just about clinging on. It's about choosing joy, again and again, even when the world keeps trying to wash it away. You light a candle that night, not because you need it, but because you want it. You sit by the fire, feet tucked under you, and you breathe deep. You have nothing more than you did before the flood. And somehow, you have more. Because what you've built now isn't just a home, it's a memory made solid, a map for the next storm, a promise to yourself. Section 11, The Long Watch. The rains are behind you, but their echo remains etched into the rhythm of your days. In the stillness of a morning breeze or the creak of a drying rafter, you hear it. That soft, almost imperceptible reminder that the world is not always kind. And so you begin what the old women call the long watch. It's not an official task. No lord or priest declares it. But everyone knows it's necessary. The long watch is how you stay ready. How you live after you've learned just how quickly comfort can be swallowed by chaos. Each morning, you check the sky, not with panic, but with precision. Is that cloud too low? Is the wind blowing wrong? Your eyes grow sharper. Your senses tuned to warning signs. You tap the walls, listen for hollows. You run your hands over beams, searching for weakness. And slowly, without realizing it, you become your own kind of architect. In the Middle Ages, homes were often rebuilt more than once in a lifetime. Not because they were poorly made, but because nature constantly tested them. Floods, fires, plagues, winds that tore through villages like blades. Resilience wasn't an event, it was a lifestyle. You watch the animals differently now. They know things before you do. The chickens grow restless before a storm. The goats refuse water if it's gone foul. The cat doesn't cross the threshold when it senses mold. You learn to trust them. You begin leaving small offerings near the coop. Scraps of apple, bits of herbs, not for superstition, but for thanks. You check in on the stream daily. You mark its level with a twig, move it if needed. You even carve tiny notches into a stone by its bank. No one told you to. It just feels right, like you're learning the river's language, one whisper at a time. Some evenings, you sit with the midwife. She's older than most stones in the village, wears time like a second shawl. She tells you stories, not about births or fevers, but about the times after. She says the worst storms aren't the ones that come from the sky, but the ones that settle in your chest and wait. She teaches you herbs, not just for healing, but for watching. Dandelion wilts before a bad night, she says, pressing your fingers into a petal. And mugwort blooms too fast when the air gets heavy. You believe her. Historians still argue whether medieval women truly held medicinal knowledge, or whether their remedies were folk luck. But in your world, knowledge isn't written, it's lived. You learn by bruised knees, by careful observation, by the way your body feels before the storm returns. The village is quieter now, not silent, but subdued. The children don't shriek quite so loudly. The adults linger in their work. Laughter still happens, but it's softer, like a smile between friends who've survived the same fire. Your body changes too. You sleep lighter. Your steps grow more deliberate. You no longer flinch at every sudden gust, but you note it. You stop ignoring the corners of your home. You sweep them more often. You keep a basin of clean water ready, even on dry days. And still, you find joy. Not in celebration, but in small control. A roof that doesn't leak, a cloak well mended, a new bar of soap. These things matter more than they used to. You begin keeping a list, not on parchment, you don't have any, but in your head. A mental ledger of what worked and what failed. The stool that floated, the cupboard that stayed dry, the shelf that didn't hold. And you talk about these things. Sharing knowledge becomes sacred. The old man by the chapel starts carving signs, symbols for safe, strong, watch here. He nails them to trees, fence posts, corners of barns. You add your own, knotted twine, chalk lines, herbs bundled and tied to doorways. To outsiders it might seem strange, but to you it's survival through symbolism. And it builds something rare, trust. Because you're not alone. Everyone is watching, everyone is marking, everyone is learning. And that collective vigilance feels like a net stretched beneath the village, ready to catch the next fall. At dusk, you gather again by the new tree. It has grown, just barely, a few more leaves, a thicker stem. But it's alive. That's what matters. Someone hangs a ribbon from its branch, another ties a bell to its base. It jingles when the wind stirs, a little voice that says, I'm here, I remember. You find yourself whispering to it too. Not prayers, just thoughts. Small thank yous, hopes, warnings. Stay strong, you murmur. Hold fast. You touch its bark and feel your own skin steady. And one night you dream not of floods, but of standing guard. You wear armor made of willow branches and your hands glow with light. You laugh in the dream, not from fear, but from power. When you wake, you realize something. The long watch is not just about waiting. It's about becoming the watcher, the one who notices first, the one who prepares, the one who helps others remember. You sit outside that morning sipping broth from a clay cup and you smile. The world will change again. Storms will return, but so will you. Stronger, softer, wiser, more rooted than you've ever been. Section 12. When the world pretends nothing happened. The strangest part isn't the storm, it's what comes after, when the world dares to act like nothing happened. The sun rises more confidently each morning. The birds return to their usual rhythms. The baker whistles again, shaping loaves like they're spells meant to keep peace. But you know better. The field where the flood rose highest, it now sprouts thick green shoots, mocking you with their casual bloom. The road that was washed clean of footprints, it's dusty again, as if nothing sacred or terrifying ever swept across it. It's eerie, this return to normal, as if the earth itself wants to erase the memory of pain, to soothe over the scar with soft moss and sun. But you are not so quick to forget. You carry it in the way you move through space, slower, more attentive. You hesitate before crossing bridges. You scan the sky twice before leaving for market. You watch others closely too, not because you don't trust them, but because you're learning how everyone copes. Some villagers move on too quickly. They joke loudly. They rebuild with too much speed, paint walls that haven't finished drying. They plant new crops without checking the soil. You worry about them. They aren't bad people, just scared. Scared enough to pretend they're not. Others get stuck. You notice them lingering at the riverbank, staring into the water like it might speak, or sweeping the same spot of floor for an hour, or crying over bent spoons and broken combs. They need time. They need presence. You give both when you can. Historians still argue whether trauma as we understand it today even existed in medieval minds. But whatever word you use for it, haunting, ghost sickness, the weight of what you've seen, you know it's real. You feel it when your fingers trace the grain of the door frame. You feel it when you hug your neighbor just a little longer than usual. And you feel it strongest in moments of joy. Because joy now is more dangerous than ever. It opens the heart, makes you vulnerable, makes you remember what you stand to lose. So the next time someone tells a joke and the village laughs, you laugh too. But your eyes scan the horizon. You wait for the sky to darken again. But it doesn't. Not yet. Instead, the days turn warmer, softer. The kind of days meant for festivals. And that's when the elders announce it. A harvest fair. Not in celebration, they say, but in remembrance. To mark survival. To remind the land and the people that joy too can be defiant. You're asked to help decorate. You hesitate. It feels wrong, like painting over grief, like inviting another storm just by dancing. But then you see the children plucking flowers, giggling with mud on their knees, and you remember what it felt like weeks ago, not to believe the world might end. So you say yes. You string ribbons between trees, you carve little suns into apple cores, you stitch yellow into your gray shawl. It's not about forgetting, it's about blending. Holding sorrow in one hand, celebration in the other. The fair is small, tentative, but real. Someone roasts root vegetables in a pit. Someone else sings. An old woman dances in her bare feet and no one stops her. For the first time in ages, the village feels like one breath, drawn in together, released together. You let yourself eat something sweet. You sit in the grass without checking the weather. You dance, just one circle, with someone who once brought you a bucket of clean water when your hands were shaking too hard to lift one. It's beautiful and terrifying, because now you realize you've started to care again, to hope, to love. That's what rebuilding does. It tricks you into believing the world might just let you stay. You return home that night full of both warmth and fear. You light a candle not to chase away shadows, but to hold space for them. You write your name, just your name, on a piece of wood and place it on the windowsill. A reminder to yourself, I was here. And maybe, if you're lucky, when the next storm comes, it will see that name and pass you by. Or at least if it doesn't, you'll face it not as someone trying to forget, but as someone who remembers and still dares to live. The world will go on pretending, but you will never. You'll carry the story in the way you braid your hair, in the way you tend your neighbor's goats when she's too tired to move, in the way you save seeds, not just for next season, but for someone else's garden, someone you may never meet. And when the rains return, and they always do, you'll face them, not with fear, but with readiness. Because forgetting isn't survival, but remembering and still choosing to dance is. Section 13, the quiet dangers of a sunny day. It starts with warmth, not the kind that chases away cold toes or loosens aching joints, but something subtler, a stillness, a shimmer in the air. You wake up one morning and feel the difference before you even open your eyes. The linens are dry, the hearth coals are cool, and outside, the birds are silent. The first truly hot day has arrived, and while the rest of the village celebrates, laying out clothes to bleach, airing mattresses in the sun, opening shutters wide, you narrow your eyes and feel your body tense. Because after all you've survived, you know this. Sometimes danger doesn't come in storm clouds. Sometimes it comes in silence. In medieval Europe, a heat wave wasn't merely unpleasant, it could be deadly. With no refrigeration, no air circulation, and no access to clean, cold water, entire villages were vulnerable to dehydration, sickness, and the spread of rot. But it wasn't just physical. The heat changed minds. At first, the warmth feels like mercy. Crops shoot up in the fields. Bread rises faster. Milk curdles just right for cheese. The roads dry. Markets bustle. Children run barefoot through the grass, their laughter trailing like ribbons. You smile, you do. You sun your herbs, mend cloth outside, sip weak ale from a warm wooden cup. But your eyes never leave the horizon, because the heat doesn't leave. Days pass, then a week, then two. The sun gets heavier. The wind dies. The well water turns cloudy. Chickens pant. The goat refuses to eat. You feel it in your temples, a pulsing ache that won't quite fade. You start waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, mouth dry, heart racing. Neighbors start getting short with each other, not angrily, just sharp, irritable. One woman accuses another of stealing a turnip. Two boys fight over a pail of water. The blacksmith stops whistling. Even the priest shortens his sermons. It's too hot for grace. You adapt. You wet cloths and hang them in doorways. You dig a shallow trench outside your cottage and line it with pebbles, pouring small buckets of water there to evaporate coolness into the air. You sleep on the floor, closest to the earth. You stop cooking during the day and learn to love cold stews. You watch the sun like it's a predator. Each noon it climbs too high. Each evening it takes longer to sink. The village smells of sweat and slow decay. You light incense not for prayers but to mask the scent of old cheese, dying fruit, and tired bodies. One afternoon, a traveler collapses outside the inn. The women rush to him, offering water, shade, fanning his face. He mutters of a horse dead on the road, of a merchant who tied wet rags to his own ankles, desperate to cool the blood in his veins. He is not old, but he looks ruined. Heat, you realize, wears the body from the inside out. Historians debate whether communities truly understood heat exhaustion or if they mistook it for madness, possession, or weakness. You believe they understood enough. They just didn't have the words. In the hottest part of each day, the village becomes ghostly. Doors close, curtains drawn. You hear only the hum of insects. See only the wavering distortion of heat over stone. Time thickens. You read shadows like they're sundials, waiting for evening's gift of breath. You find small pleasures, a handful of cool berries, a stolen nap in a cellar, a soft breeze at dawn, and with each one, you remind yourself, this is survival. Not grand, not brave, but slow and real and necessary. Some women smear their skin with crushed mint or vinegar. Some brew teas with rose hips and elderflower. The healer mixes clay with water and smears it on children's backs, drawing little sons with her finger to keep them laughing. You join her sometimes, not to help, but to be helped. At night, sleep returns in pieces. You lie flat on your back, limbs splayed, dreaming of cold streams and shaded woods. And even in dreams, the sun follows. It burns the edge of your vision. You wake often, but you survive. One night, the breeze returns. You almost don't notice it at first. A single flutter of cloth, then another. You rise, step outside and feel it, the kiss of wind on your damp collarbone. You inhale so deeply it feels like you might float. You cry a little, not from sadness, from relief. The next day is not cooler, but the next one is. Then the clouds come, not storming, not roaring, but soft. They dapple the light, they forgive the earth. The goats return to grazing. The chickens dig for worms. The traveler, who had stayed silent for days, begins to sing, and you gather everyone in the square. You don't call it a celebration, just a sharing. Water, shade, stories. A reminder of what was endured and what can be learned. You pass around bowls of soaked bread with herbs. You braid each other's hair. You leave jugs of water at every doorstep. Not because it's needed, but because it might be, again. You do not forget the heat. You do not pretend the danger is gone. But for today, you sit in the shade and let your body relax. Because survival is not just about resisting. Sometimes it's about allowing peace, allowing breath, allowing joy to come back in, one quiet moment at a time. Section 14, the rituals that keep you going. You rise just before the light. Not because you must. There's no chore calling your name, no rooster crowing with urgency, but because this is when you feel most in control. The village still sleeps. The world is quiet. And in that silence, you carve out something rare in the medieval life, intention. You begin with your hands. First, you dip them into cool water left in a basin by the door. You trace the veins along your palms. You press them together, not in prayer, but in acknowledgement. These hands have carried, cut, sewn, scraped, soothed. They have survived another season. That alone is worth honoring. In the Middle Ages, people lived by rhythm, liturgical calendars, planting cycles, sunrise and sunset. But beneath the grand church-sanctioned rituals were smaller, quieter ones. Personal rituals. Acts that tethered you to your body, your sanity, your small corner of a vast, indifferent world. Yours are simple. You tie your hair a certain way each morning. You whisper your mother's name before drinking. You hum an old tune as you lace your boots. These rituals don't protect you from disease or hunger, but they remind you who you are beneath all the surviving. Others in the village have their own. The healer marks her door with ash every Monday. The baker spins in a circle before opening his shutters. He says it wards off envy. Even the priest, though stern and scripted, rubs his thumb 3 times along the hem of his robe before stepping into the pulpit. These aren't spells, not exactly, but they are magic, in the way that all repetition becomes sacred, in the way that intention becomes armor. The summer has turned strange, not dangerous yet, but odd. Birds have migrated too early. The moon has hung low and orange for 3 nights, and someone found a calf born with 2 heads in the next village over. You don't panic, you adjust. Your rituals become more deliberate. You sprinkle lavender under your pillow. You leave honey at the window ledge. You step over the threshold with your left foot instead of your right. Why? You couldn't say, but it feels safer that way. Historians still argue whether these medieval superstitions stem from ignorance or control. But standing here, with your hand on the doorframe and your heart skipping a beat, you know the answer. They stem from hope. Hope that your small actions matter. Hope that the world notices your effort. Hope that chaos will see your rituals and go around you. Your neighbor has started painting little white dots on her fence posts. You ask her why. She shrugs and says, to keep the forgetting away. You don't ask what she means. You just nod, and the next day you paint your own fence. The forgetting is real. It comes in the form of long days blending together, of names slipping from memory, of old wounds resurfacing without context. You find a deep cut in your palm one morning, with no memory of how it got there. It unnerves you, so you add another ritual. You begin marking time with scratches on your wooden bedpost. One for each day survived since the last rain. They aren't beautiful, they don't form a pattern, but they exist, and that is enough. You start keeping a bundle of rosemary in your pocket, not for cooking, not even for scent, just something to hold. When the world spins too fast, you grip it. When your thoughts race, you sniff its greenness. One afternoon, a young girl visits you, crying over a broken spindle. You don't fix it. You give her a ribbon and teach her to knot it around her wrist. Each knot for a kindness, you say. She smiles. A new ritual is born. You learn to share them. Not all of them. Some rituals are too private, too stitched into your bones. But the ones that bring calm, the ones that ask for nothing but presence, you pass along. To friends, to strangers, to your own reflection. One evening at the edge of dusk, you light 3 candles and place them in the window. Not because anyone asked, not because it's a feast day, but because you remember your grandmother once doing the same. And that memory brings peace. The next evening, 2 more windows glow. The village watches, not with suspicion, but curiosity. Soon, others follow. A quiet tradition forms. No explanation, no blessing from the church, no official rule, just light, at the same hour, in the same stillness. A collective exhale. You realize then that rituals are more than survival tactics. They're threads. Threads that stitch people together through time, across hardship, across forgetting. When you hang your herbs just so, when you hum that one tune while grinding flour, you're not just calming yourself, you're reaching through centuries. You're saying, I was here, I mattered, I moved with care. You add one more ritual. Each night before sleep, you whisper a name. Not always someone you knew. Sometimes a name from a dream or a story or a grave marker you once passed. You give it voice, you give it place. Because in a world so quick to erase, naming is resistance. Tomorrow you will rise again before the sun. You will dip your hands in the basin. You will tie your hair, hum your tune, touch the lavender at your sill. You will remember. And the world, chaotic and relentless, will keep spinning. But you will meet it with rhythm, with meaning, with rituals like lanterns in the dark. Section 15. When the light finally breaks. You almost don't believe it when it happens. It starts with a smell, wet earth, sharp and green, like something cracked open. Then the wind changes, carrying the tang of distant water. You stand at the doorway, hand on the lintel, holding your breath, waiting, wondering if it's just your mind playing tricks again, like it did after the 3rd week of heat. But no, the clouds are rolling in, not storm clouds, not the bruised and blistered ones that bring hail and chaos, but deep gray veils that stretch slowly across the sky. They don't threaten, they promise. You step outside barefoot. The ground is hot but soft. The sky darkens gently, like someone pulling a blanket over the sun. Others have noticed too. Faces peek from shutters, children gather in lanes, chickens flap uneasily and then go still. The first drop lands on your collarbone, then another on your wrist, then 10, then 20. Cool and fat and honest. You laugh, not because anything is funny, but because the world is finally giving you what you begged for in silence. You look up and let the rain touch your face. It's not a deluge, not yet, just a steady, blessed patter. The air smells like survival. The village exhales as one, buckets appear, doors open. Someone begins singing, soft, tuneless, full of relief. And you begin moving, not with urgency, but with reverence. You bring out cloth to catch the rain. You kneel and feel the droplets on your scalp, in your hair, cooling your spine. For a few perfect minutes, no one speaks, because this moment is sacred. And in the Middle Ages, rain was more than weather, it was proof. Proof that prayers might be heard, that curses don't last forever, that life continues. You remember the rituals you performed through the dry days, the scratch marks, the rosemary, the whispered names. You remember every cracked lip and dizzy spell, every sour smell and sleepless night. You remember how close despair came. And now you remember something else, renewal. Because even in this rough world, some cycles still hold. The earth turns, the skies change, the drought breaks. You begin the work of restoration. Not rebuilding, not yet, but reclaiming. You help patch a thatched roof that caved during the heat. You replant herbs that turn to dust. You boil fresh rainwater and add a sprig of lemon balm just because you can. You sit in a circle with other women and share dried fruits and wet stories. There are tears, not for loss, but for making it through. You learn again how to laugh without guilt, how to touch your skin without flinching, how to walk slowly and enjoy the breeze without scanning for danger. The children play again, this time not in desperation, but in joy. And you notice something even more surprising. You feel stronger, not physically, though your arms have hardened from all the labor, but spiritually. There is a weight inside you now, forged by fire and thirst and silence, and it is not a burden, it is a foundation. You are no longer merely surviving, you are living with memory. The priest gives a sermon that week, one about trials and providence, but you only half listen, because your real sermon happened under the rain. Your real scripture is the soft mud between your toes. Your real salvation is the breath you take now, long, deep, and unbroken. Historians still argue whether the common folk of the Middle Ages had complex emotional lives or if they were too burdened to reflect. But standing here, soaked and smiling, you know they did, because you do, and you are them. You return to your rituals, not out of fear now, but out of celebration. You still hum as you work, still light candles at twilight, still braid rosemary into your hair. But now the actions are brighter, less protection, more devotion, less survival, more gratitude. The village begins to change too, not quickly, not dramatically, but gently. People speak more, sing more. They make up silly games, start sharing stories. One man carves a rain mark into the well post, and others follow, turning it into a communal calendar of joy. You join in. You begin writing small verses on scraps of cloth and tucking them into walls, into baskets, into pockets. Words like remember, soft, stay, rise. A secret language of those who made it through. The worst may not be over. War still looms beyond the hills. Sickness still waits in corners. Winters will still freeze your bones. But now you know something deeper. You are capable of withstanding, of adapting, of remembering joy, even when it's buried under cracked earth and empty skies. And that is enough. That is everything. One morning, as you rinse your hands in a fresh bowl of water, you whisper a final name, not of the dead, not of the lost, your own, and it echoes just slightly like the world itself is answering. You smile, you breathe, you begin again. End of script. Sweet dreams.